New World play numbers are dropping, and I'm getting a little bit worried that we might actually reach an all-time low. So we're going to take a look at the play numbers for March and before. We'll talk about why the numbers are what they are and what's actually going to change going forward. So here you can see Steam charts for New World, and we can have a look at the play numbers, right? So for March, it was just under 15,000 people, right? That's the average players for that month, with a peak of 24,000. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that our lowest months were actually July and June, so basically midsummer last year. And a little bit weirdly, I guess you could say, in July, we actually had a lower average, but a higher peak players. I don't quite know why that happened. Maybe we started getting news in July. Maybe that was the end of the Summer Medley Fair. I think so. But 15,000 people is an average, and you can see actually in the last 30 days it's going down, which basically means that the start of April is like worse than this time last month. But effectively 15,000 people average, that's actually the third lowest we've had. And let's face it, if New World didn't get any more content and we were just sort of like left to our own devices, the play numbers here would continue to go down. They are leveling off because there is probably like a die-hard amount of fans that will just keep playing it anyway. For example, when this video goes live, I'm probably streaming it on Twitch, right? Come and follow me, by the way. But there's definitely people getting a little bit fed up with New World right now. We've not really had any content since October, effectively about 6 months ago. Yes, we've had little patches here and there, but like content-wise, the season 1 patch is where we're actually starting. And this is sort of to be expected, right? Most MMOs these days are going to a sort of seasonal model, as in your player base will come when you've got new content and then move away when you don't. And then the diehards will persist. Now, the real big question here is, what is season 1 going to do to these play numbers? And by now we should have known. Obviously that has been delayed several times, and I've done a whole video about why that's a problem, mainly for the leaderboard. I don't mind them delaying content, but pushing the leaderboard, bit of a problem. And thankfully we have a solution for the leaderboard issue going forward, but it's not going to apply to this leaderboard. They do have a solution for the future, but this time around it's going to be a little bit wild at the end. So the leaderboard thing, that's going to get resolved, and then if they do need to delay content, which they're obviously not going to be thrilled about, then they at least have a solution. Okay, so the play numbers are dropping. What's going to actually change that? Is season 1 going to do it? I have a big doubt there, if I'm honest. So at this point, we've seen this a few times right now. Season 1 is literally around the corner, currently scheduled for the 4th of April, Tuesday, by the way, for anybody not keeping up to date with all of the delays. And the question is, will that move the needle? And my personal opinion is no. I think it's going to give Amazon some revenue because people like myself are going to buy the premium season pass. It just is what it is. But I don't think the actual content is going to be like something that brings people back. A bit of a quest line could do, but it's about 2 hours, 3 hours long, something like that. And if I'm honest, there's a lot of running about in it. A new expedition, we've seen before that we've had many new expeditions and never really have they moved the player numbers at all. Gear set storage is good quality of life, but really it should have been in from the start of the game. Let me just say that, I do think that. But I think that's mainly for people who currently play rather than getting people back. Seasonal events are just one of those things that, again, like people like when they're doing them, if they're fresh and interesting, and then they're not really bothered about them. The PvP with the AoE circles and stuff like that, that's very good. And so is the balance changes. I think they're actually primarily like a good direction. Whether or not it ends up being fun, we'll find out when we actually get into the game and we get to play it with the new meta. But I like the idea of them, even if the execution might be a little bit off. Either way, my point is, none of that in season 1 suggests to me that it will bring players back. The thing that would be the new content, and the new content is basically a seasonal story that lasts 2 hours and a new expedition. So my view is that that won't move the play numbers. And if I'm right, then we could be in for our lowest play numbers at all time. If the play numbers continue that trend, then we might get a little blip for April. Maybe it will actually go up to maybe like 16,000, something like that. But in May and June, we could be looking at a similar amount from last year. We could be dropping to like 13, 14,000, maybe even the lowest yet. But don't let this be all doom and gloom. I actually don't think things are bad. Yes, the delays for season 1 are frustrating, and I completely get that. But I think this is all sort of like planned. It's almost like planned obsolescence. It's a planned downtime. And then they're going to try and have this sort of like seasonal cadence with a big update once per year, which they said in the dev updates, right? And speaking of the big update, the expansion, which you can see here, I'm convinced, by the way, that there's going to be more in that expansion. I keep saying that multiple times. There almost certainly is. But I think, importantly, that the expansion will probably get announced properly and revealed in summer, maybe at Summer Games Fest. And I think this is where things will change. A lot of the perception of the game will change because we'll have an end game when we have the Sandworm Elite trial. That'll be a proper raid. It's going to be rough, I think, because it'll be the first forage into this sort of like big battle, PvE battle. But I think this will be the point where things start changing for New World, because we'll have Season 2, which I think has more content in it for a lot of players than say Season 1. And then not only that, we're going to have probably a trailer for the expansion. This will then build hype, and really hype is the currency that MMOs run on. Well, probably all video games really, but specifically MMOs in this case. So just to prove that, you can see that the player numbers actually started going up last year in September. That was before we actually had any of the content. Yes, we had the summer medley fair, right? But really it was that hype for Brimstone that brought people back. The hype was the selling point, and then people faded away. It's completely normal. So my point is, the play numbers are possibly going to dip to the lowest point ever, but I don't want people to be overly concerned by that. The reality is we haven't had any content for 6 months, so that's understandable. And we have an expansion at the end of this year. Until that hype for that expansion really starts kicking in, I think people won't really be that bothered with New World right now. That's not to say the game's bad or anything like that. Yes, these delays are frustrating, and I completely understand that point right now. You shouldn't have your players being frustrated with what they have now. They should sort of be like a happy wind down rather than a frustrating wind down. But that's not what we have right now, just because of these delays. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter if we hit the lowest peak or the lowest trough, whatever you want to call it, as long as when we get that new content and we get the hype rolling, that people will come back. I think right now they will, but I'll tell you what, I do think they have a lot riding on this expansion, and that has me worried, as I said in a previous video, which I'll try and link, which I don't normally say, but I'll try and link so you can actually go and watch it. Otherwise, come and follow me over on Twitch. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.